What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Claudia Bellafato holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. Got a fun show for everybody lined up on this Monday. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and try and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. Claudia, what do we got coming up today?
Yeah, plenty of good stuff on this Monday slate, guys. Of course, we're talking hoops. On to the Sweet 16, men and women narrowed down the field. Then NFL meeting of the minds, latest from owners meeting in Orlando. And of course, the all-weekend team as we do on Monday. What you missed while watching March Madness. And speaking of that, I know everybody's saying, and we'll get to the Caitlin Clark quote, about the fact that the men's tournament doesn't have as much hype as the women's. But I think we've seen enough craziness, enough madness to get people watching, and the numbers show it actually. Saturday games averaged 10.8 million viewers. That's the most watched first day of round 32 in the history of March Madness. So GoJo, let's go to you first. The first round for the one seeds was pretty easy. It was pretty much a breeze from all of them, at least 30-point margin wins for all of them. Round two got a little sweaty, especially for Houston. Let's start with that game.
Yeah, well, I think that's really the one that kind of differentiated itself from the rest of the one seed in a year where, for just the fifth time in history now, we have in the men's tournament all of the 1 and 2 seeds advancing to the Sweet 16, and most of them doing it with relative ease, Dad. I think there's a point to be made about what's upcoming in this tournament and what has a chance to actually make the Sweet 16 on incredibly compelling in a way that we talked about probably wasn't the case going into the men's tournament for a number of reasons. But my God in heaven, that Houston game last night, I don't know if half the people on the East Coast managed to stay up for that. You had twin flames in that and the Stanford Cardinal and Iowa State Hawkeye or Cyclones on the women's side going blow for blow into overtime as well. But man, Houston, and Dad, I think this is why. Houston's a good microcosm of why the tournament is always going to be very safe and compelling. Like this year, yes, chalky as hell, chalkier than usual, but you still had the Oaklands of the world, Grand Canyons of the world, Yales of the world getting upsets in the first round and getting to the round of 32. But then even you look within the body of this Houston game, Dad, a one seed, a team that's got all this prestige around it from one of the power conferences here, and the only reason they are able to ice a game in which they have 4 players foul out, totaling in about 71 points scored in this game, and they are saved by the heroics of one of their one of their 4-year walk-on players. That moment and seeing him step to the free throw line and have to knock down 1 of 2 to keep this thing going, and now the name Ryan Elvin, this small white 4-year walk-on who is beloved by his teammates and someone who, the more you read about him, they had the utmost confidence in. You saw the smiles in the huddle as he's stepping to the line, and he knocks down 1 of 2 to help put this game just out of reach as the rest of the team was sort of falling down around him. So as long as you continue to have that stuff, which will be as long as you continue to have college athletics, I do feel like this tournament is always going to find a way to draw us in.
Yeah, just like Claudia said in the beginning, going into this, everybody was saying that the women's tournament was going to be more impressive than the men's, and name value was there. And it's still there. Don't get me wrong. This isn't anything against the women's tournament. It's still exciting as hell. But the men's tournament, I think, turned out to be, maybe we didn't give it as much credit or had to wait and see on this. From the chalk side, This is kind of an odd year. There was only one double-digit seed that made the Sweet 16 this year, and that's North Carolina State with our buddy DJ Burns, the big man who was on fire in their last game to move on to the Sweet 16. So from that case, it has been kind of a chalky go so far as we get through the first weekend. But yeah, that game, that's what you look for, the moments. Like you said, is Yale going to pull another one off? Is Oakland going to pull another one off? Though with Oakland, it was against another double-digit seed in North Carolina State after Oakland pulled off the great upset in the first round. And it wasn't going to happen. There were a lot of blowouts. But late last night, and that's the beauty where, Mike, we're lucky being on the West Coast now, we're able to see Anderson Garcia for Texas A&M hit a shot at the buzzer for them to tie the game up at 86-all against number one seed Houston. And just, I mean, the way he got mobbed, it was like they won the game. I mean, it was just, that was a great moment. And then going into overtime, like I said, the other moment of Elvin coming in, a 4-year walk-on. Because I have never seen, I don't know if you have, Mike, or Claudia, I don't know if you've seen, I have never seen a game where 4 of the starters fouled out. Yeah. 4 of Houston's starters fouled out. And by the way, 2 for Texas A&M. So 6 starters out of 10 fouled out of this game as it went to overtime. But as Mike said, you rely on a 4-year walk-on that you don't think you're going to have to rely on, yet you do. And he walks on, and man, when he missed that first one, I thought, oh no. Yep. But it was interesting, the announcer broke down that shot when he missed it, and he said, at least he missed it long. Which I thought was, he goes, now he can settle down and get his regular stroke. He said, basically, if you missed it short, it's because you're too tight. He said he missed it long, and that was good. Next one was nothing but net. And what a moment. What a moment for a kid who had been there as a walk-on for his entire career to go into that big moment. Can't wait to hear what was going through his mind.
Well, and so it was really interesting for people that are going to get to know him over the course of the day. He's a guy that apparently means a ton to everyone else on that team. There was an article in Paper City Magazine about him coming off senior day where they beat Kansas to end up clinching the Big 12 regular season title. And he got to start that game, and all of his teammates were basically saying, we all wanted this for him. If the coach hadn't have done this, there would have probably been a mutiny on that team. But even LJ Cryer, who was a transfer on that team, said, when I first got there in practice, they had me checking him, and I'm like, you guys are having me guard a walk-on? This feels disrespectful. And he's like, I learned very quickly that this dude gave me buckets, that this dude was always in the gym, and that this guy was a legitimate player. And so the fact that he was in that position to be the guy they brought off as all those guys went down around him says a lot about the confidence they have. But I'll tell anyone, go back and look at the TV copy. When they're all huddling up right before that, there are smiles in that huddle because everybody in there trusted what he was about going into this moment. Dad, in a season where he was 3 of 4 from the free throw line for the entire season.
Yeah. You know, I would bring up a reference right now. There was a movie that I watched where a kid who very rarely played got fouled at the end of the game and had to make a couple of free throws. It was very, very exciting and a true story, the movie Hoosiers, which, of course, you have not seen. I doubt Claudia has seen, so I'm not going to bring up that reference of that happening, even though I kind of just did. Of making
people passing the basketball, but Mike, I'm good.
In a general sense, isn't there there's a player on that on every team, isn't there? On every team in almost every sport. When you go through your time, there's a few people, but it's like Rudy got the headline for it, right? Of being a movie about him, Notre Dame and Rudy and the whole thing. But there are guys, men and women like that on every sporting team at every school that plays, right? I mean, I'm sure you had one. We had one without question. And it's just a cool moment. And we've always talked about the camaraderie of the locker room, the weight room, what field you play on. And man, it really kind of manifests itself when you have so invested in, and not just in this moment when you needed it, but anytime a person like that gets some meaningful playing time.
Yep, exactly. It's when that investment finally gets a chance to shine there. You're absolutely right. And that's why, again, as long as there are players like that and stories like that, which always pop up, the tournament's going to be fine. I think when we've talked about a lot of the buzz around men's March Madness, it's been the overall lack of season buzz. It's been the storylines coming in. You know you're going to find them. It's like prospecting during March Madness. You just sit here and you sift through because you bought in bulk in the tournament. That's why it's always going to win, because postseason sporting events and college athletics are like shopping at Costco. You buy in bulk, and then you end up finding the good stuff once you get home and sift through the bag. And I think for this one, the good one's going to be, and the interesting part about this tournament, Dad, is it feels like a throwback. Like if we had played this tournament 20 years ago, it would be the biggest thing since sliced bread, because we've got all of these compelling bigs moving on, right? Like you saw so many guys between John Filipkowski at Duke, between Donovan Clingan at UConn, obviously Zach Edey, who's going to sweep all the Player of the Year awards and leave with one of the most decorated college careers ever. You got all these bigs that are getting ready to tangle. And it's funny because Zach Edey is, to me, the poster of what can be cool about this tournament going forward. Certainly one of the best players, but also the reason why maybe men's college basketball is having a little bit of a popularity issue right now. Because as we've talked about one and dones and its effect on the sport, and will the G League Ignite folding have to change anything here? Zach Edey's been here 4 years, balling as a 7'4" big man in college basketball. And because he plays an antiquated style of basketball and a true post-up big, and because he's a little bit more of a quiet kid, talking to people, he's just kind of a reserved personality, which is fine. There's nothing against him, but when you're trying to sell the sport, those kinds of things would go a long way. A more exciting style of play maybe for people would go a long way in selling that. And instead what you have now is people are going to be wowed by that during the tournament, but for whatever reason weren't as much coming in, Dad. If John Filipkowski had maybe tripped somebody earlier in the year, maybe in December, we could be talking about that a little bit more and have had a Duke villain. But now I do think we're in position to get a payoff on the back end with all these quality bigs.
It's amazing. You think about the matchups coming up in this tournament, and I did for a fleeting moment, but I'm not going to lie. Those names you just mentioned, I envisioned them, in the future playing against Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren, and the bigs matchup we're going to start getting in the NBA, because we're used to the bigs but moving like crazy. These guys, play down in the post a lot and really do their magic down there, though. So that's kind of where my mind went. I hope we do get good matchups in this tournament, because that's what we're on now. But I immediately took it to the next level of the NBA and all these bigs matching up.
Well, I do think that's also a part of this, Dad, is as we're trying to gauge and figure out, fixing men's college basketball the way that for on radio for years we did with baseball, you do kind of look at it and I think have this understanding that, all right, it usually helps when you can sell somebody as a bona fide NBA prospect, right? When we're looking at one of these guys. And listen, Donovan Clingan, a bunch of these guys are legitimate, like high-end prospects here. Clingan probably the most so because of the names you mentioned, Dad. Zach Edey, much more of the post that we would have had 10, 20 years ago. Right. Donovan Clingan, moving up and down the court, maybe not as deadly from three and outside as some of these new age bigs, but still a guy that's got all that dynamic athleticism in the way that he plays. You're right. Part of it is the projection to the next level and maybe having that become more of a part of it going forward. I'm not sure exactly, but I do think the bottom line is we can get that there, but UConn looks like a wagon right now. That was the biggest thing. Like you have, Houston, a great story is the one seed here. They're the first team since 1987 to win an NCAA tournament game where they had 4 different players foul out. They've obviously made a couple of runs here recently. Purdue been trying to get over the hump. You've got Marquette advancing to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2013. Duke advances to the Sweet 16 for the 33rd time in program history, but the first time under John Shire as they've made the transition. Like Claudia, the sport has undergone a lot of transition, and so I do think we need to factor that into the way that we talk about it, but a lot of these places, Duke included, are finding a way to level set even after doing what should have been one of the most historically difficult dismounts in sports. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've all reset well. You guys talked about this being chalky. I have to go against the fact that everybody complains about it being chalk. Do we really? I get the double-digit seeds are fun, but then when it really comes down to the wire, they usually get blown out. So I like it chalky, I have to say. The top 4 lines, 12 of the 16 teams now are in those top 4 seeds. I want to bring in the odds quick here because, of course, this is going to change throughout the tournament. UConn's still the favorite, plus 210. You have a pretty big jump to Houston at 5-1, Purdue plus 650, Arizona 9-1. Those are the top 4. Senior, you were bragging about how your bracket has been up to this point, but I'm curious, and we'll go to you first. Do you have another team that you put ahead of UConn right now to win it all? Any of those numbers stand out to you?
Oh yeah, I did. I have Purdue winning it all. I have actually Arizona beating Purdue or beating UConn in the Final Four to make it to the championship, and I have Arizona and Purdue for the title. So I do have Purdue in this, and you're right. Our GoJo and Golic pool, which we have right around 43,000 people in it right now. I am 899th. I think I'm the only one of the entire show in front of the camera and behind the camera. I'm the highest right now. I don't usually like to brag, but I'm going to do it mainly because I'm beating Mike.
GoJo?
You don't like to brag. You expect us to believe that. Dad, you're among the worst winners I've ever been around in my life. That's been true since I was a child, and we were playing mini golf at the Farmington Valley River Course right by our house here. Since when do you not like to anyone in my family would testament that you, among all people, when things are going well, are absolutely the first to brag.
You just mentioned putt-putt when we used to go as a family. There's two of us here. One of us threw, and it's a beautiful golf course with the river running right next to it. One of us here missed a shot and threw their putter into said river.
Yes.
That was you. That wasn't me.
100%. Because I didn't claim to be a good loser the way you claim to just be a good winner. You showboating and peacocking all over the miniature golf course is the evidence I offer when you said, well, I don't like to brag, because that's BS. You love to brag. You live to brag. When you're in a moment where you're winning, you love to throw it in the faces of your friends and enemies alike.
Here's where I feel bad as a parent. You missed my parenting moment. When we were doing putt-putt and I was being braggadocious, I was trying to motivate you to do better. I was trying to build you up, make you get that fire in your gut to say, I'm going to beat that old man. I'm going to beat him. If I don't beat him in putt-putt, I'm going to beat him with the putter. So just something to get the fire going. And what did it make you do? It made you throw a putter into the river. So I'm sorry I missed on the way I was supposed to parent there.
Is that not fire enough for you? That seems like fire to me. That seems like a volcano, Claudia. Claudia, as the unbiased third-party viewer in this situation here, what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like fire?
Don't bring me into this. This is a father-son situation. I see it from both sides. I see the perspective. But I have to say, just in the few weeks that I've known you, Senior, but in the few weeks that I've known Senior, he does like to let people know if he is on top of something. So I agree with GoJo there, but I also do think you instilled the fire and the putt-putt, whatever it was. So I'm with you both here. I'm splitting the difference.
First on the fire, Mike, the fire I'm trying to build is a positive fire that will lead you to great success, not getting DQ'd at a
you don't get to color the fire. It's just fire.
Into the river. And the other part about it, me being a little braggadocious, listen, I'm the elder statesman of this entire crew. So all of ya, as far as this pool is concerned, I'm kicking your butts. How about that?
Okay, there we go. There is my father's very expert analysis of the poop noise into the microphone there. By the way, speaking of poop noises here, the weirdest thing I heard from yesterday, and we'll get to plenty of what came up in the women's tournament, speaking of smack talking and people getting upset about nonsense. Dan Hurley, we heard this last night, the report from Tracy Wolfson during their game, that he is so superstitious that he's wearing all the same clothes he wore last year during March Madness, and that includes his Red Dragon underwear from last year, and said that his wife travels with a portable washing machine to make sure that his clothes are clean. And I think all of us had the same reaction that Iron Eagle had last night, which is, what the hell's a portable washing machine? And why do you, the multi-million-dollar head coach of one of the best college basketball teams in the country, need to travel with one instead of letting one of the team people wash it the way they wash everyone else's clothes, using the washing machine in the hotel like everybody else? What sort of weird butter-churning solo washing machine are you making your wife lug around? This is insane.
Okay, agreed. But I'm going to go back very quickly. Did you say Red Dragon underwear? Why are they called Red Dragon underwear? I mean, are we naming things? I mean, what are we doing? I mean,
I would imagine they've probably got a red dragon somewhere featured prominently on them, would be my guess.
Okay.
Maybe I would imagine if it's underwear on the crotch or on the ass.
No, I feel like they're like scattered around it, probably. It's like a pattern of Red Dragon, is it not? I don't know. You guys are the boxer dudes. I'm just assuming.
Like I said, or it's just a nickname for his underwear.
No, Senior, why? It's too early. It's a Monday. It's really too early for that.
A nickname for his underwear?
It's GoJo, really?
Oh, somebody explain it to him.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't need much explanation, Dad. I think everybody gets it. It's not the fact that it needs explaining. It's the fact that you said it is the part that has us confused.
We had a lot of coffee this morning already. All right, sorry.
Too many mushrooms over there.
Dad is wired his mushroom-laced coffee that's got him hot and bothered. You know what? We'll roll that energy into something good, guys. By the way, we'll remind you, the Final Four, Saturday, April 6th. Dad will be joining Mitch Moss and Paulie Howard live from the DraftKings Sportsbook in Scottsdale, AZ, for a special edition of VSiN's Follow the Money leading up to the first games. Make sure you tune in or stop by and hang out in person there. It's Saturday, April 6th from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern at the DraftKings Sportsbook property, right there near the Waste Management Open, TPC Scottsdale. So check Dad out there, chock full of coffee.
Monday here on GoJo and Golic. Caitlin Clark in Iowa cruised through the first round with a big win over Holy Cross, 91-65. And when she was asked about the win after, she said, well, in her own words, the women have arrived.
The excitement around this tournament, like, it's super cool. Like, people are more excited about the women's side than the men's side, and I think that's obviously something that's really never been the case before, and it's cool to see how it's evolved. Like, when I first started this when I was a freshman, like, we couldn't even use the March Madness branding, and now to see this, and really it's just taken a whole nother level, and I expect it to continue to grow this year, and I think that's the coolest thing for myself.
Tonight's matchup with West Virginia will be the last home game of Caitlin Clark's Iowa career, and they are 16-point favorites, GoJo. She's right, though. I mean, she's not going to say that she herself is the reason there's so much hype in women's basketball, but she's a big part of it.
She's a huge part of it. There's no doubt, but I'm glad she reframed it like that because, Dad, I remember covering that when we were at ESPN, where you did get reminded that March Madness was only licensed to the men's tournament. You had that gross disparity in the tournament gifts during the pandemic season that got highlighted on social media by, I forget if it was Sabrina Ionescu or one of her teammates with that Oregon squad. But when you looked around, you saw the inequity right in front of everybody. And so for it to have changed this much in such a short amount of time is an incredible testament to the work of those young women.
I think it was a weight room, wasn't it, during March Madness? That the workout facility.
It was the weight room
that
and
they
the
could
gift
work out
bags,
in.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. The disparity was amazing, and how quickly, really over the amount of time basketball has been around, how quickly that gap has closed. And as we've talked about with another set of youngsters coming up, so the name value is going to stay there as we have these big names going to be moving on after this year, but hopefully just to continue to build on the WNBA side as well. This has been great. And like for the most part, chalk holds. We got 8 teams in the Sweet 16 right now, and the highest seed right now is Duke at number 7 after pulling off the upset, beating Ohio State. But other than that, you have a 5, a 3, a 4, a 2, a 1, a 3, a 1. But we know the women's game can be a little more chalky as well, but that doesn't mean, so we're getting through these rounds, but, coming up pretty soon, we're going to start to get the matchups that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, and listen, not without some drama there. Certainly, you mentioned Kara Lawson and what she's done with that Duke program now to have them in this position. They beat Ohio State, that, remember, was the team that was the regular season Big Ten champions over Iowa and had done so well there. So not insignificant there. Last night, you had Iowa State. Like we talked about the Houston matchup. That Iowa State-Stanford matchup was an absolute barn burner there. The Cyclones had looked great. Cameron Brink, one of the star players for Stanford, fouls out late in that game, and a bunch of amateur lip readers like myself are trying to figure out if she really did in fact say that to an official I've been amazed, Dad, watching still the sensitivity of people watching high-level competitors go out there and do their thing. Like the other day, Angel Reese and LSU were down a little bit to Middle Tennessee State. Like that game looked a little bit hairy, and then her, Flau'jae Johnson, and the rest had kind of a third quarter explosion that put that behind. But late in that game, there was a player that got her 5th foul from Middle Tennessee State and fouled out on Angel Reese and was getting pretty physical with her.
Right.
Some people said it was Angel flopping, and there were people that thought Angel was waving goodbye to her on the camera. Now, Angel came out and said that that was nonsense. She said that that was clickbait in her own words. But even if it wasn't, so what? I can't understand how people got this sensitive over stuff that's like baseline competitive juice. You want to talk about why the women's game has been popular? It's because we get personality out of these young ladies in a way that it doesn't feel like we get as much of in men's college basketball right now. But people at home want to clutch pearls over that? Serious? I thought we were done with this after the Caitlin Clark championship thing last year. I really were.
Hey, like you said, I thought it was waving goodbye as well, and I didn't care. People understand it was literally 2 seconds after a physical foul just happened. Whatever you want to say. You want to say she flopped, this two were physical on one another. It's a game. It's a competitive game. And in that heated moment, I quite honestly still think she waved bye-bye to the player. But again, I don't care. You're in the heat of that moment. Why do you think TV cameras interview NASCAR drivers as quickly as they do? Why do you think the NFL, will let in media has to wait a little bit of time before they go to NFL locker rooms? They'd like to do it right away. The immediacy of competition can get you to say something maybe you didn't want to say, or say something that's true and maybe you shouldn't have said out loud, but to try and get that moment. So for Angel Reese, this was the heat of the moment where this happened. So even if she was waving bye-bye to the player, I don't care. Get over it, people.
Yeah, it's silly, it's nonsense, and quite honestly, Claudia, as we get to the next bit of sound here, the least of what LSU has to be worrying about at this current moment.
Yeah, and the head coach made that clear. Kim Mulkey had a long 4-minute, basically, speech about a hit piece that came out from the Washington Post. The issue she had with it, and we'll get to a soundbite from her in a second, was the fact that the Washington Post has been working on this story for 2 years and then decided the week of the tournament to reach out asking for questions. Of course, there was no time to answer those questions. So, yeah, she was pretty heated about it.
This reporter has been working on a story about me for 2 years. After 2 years of trying to get me to sit with him for an interview, he contacts LSU on Tuesday as we were getting ready for the first round game of this tournament with more than a dozen questions, demanding a response by Thursday, right before we're scheduled to tip off. Are you kidding me? This was a ridiculous deadline that LSU and I could not possibly meet, and the reporter knew it. It was just an attempt to prevent me from commenting and an attempt to distract us from this tournament. It ain't gonna work, buddy.
Yeah, so this hasn't been released yet. It hasn't been published. Like she said, they reached out for questions. She didn't have time to answer it, but she knows the reason behind it is basically to put her in the squad, I'm assuming, in a bad light. They're plus 750 to win it all. This is interesting because the reporters after the game asked about it being a distraction, and she said something like, I didn't even tell my kids about it because it's ridiculous, and it really is ridiculous. GoJo, what are your thoughts on this one?
So there's a couple things here. She said that her players had no idea that she even said all that stuff, which the lie detector test determined that's a lie. Your team's online. Yeah. They know what time it is. And the players came out and said, Kim's had our back all year. We'll have her back now. They said all the right things in this. But, Dad, to Claudia's point of clarification there, this is an article that hasn't come out yet from the Washington Post. This is an article that for 2 years they tried to interview Kim Mulkey, but as she made clear, because she thought that same outlet wrote a piece that was disparaging about Brian Kelly, she had no interest in talking with them. And I saw Mike Sando over The Athletic point out that sometimes when a reporter before a publication goes out will present a non-cooperative subject with a question list, at which time that subject usually gains an understanding of some of what's coming down the pipeline there. But I want to make it clear, everyone get familiar with the term the Streisand effect, because before, if there might have been interest when this dropped now, Dad, because of Kim Mulkey's response, before anything's been written, coming out and saying, well, if there's a wrong thing about me, I will sue, because not knowing the full scope of what's in this article, now everybody is going to be dialed in for this. And people are going to be waiting for appointment reading in a way that I didn't think was possible in 2024 because Kim wanted to draw this type of attention to it.
Well, it was also a preemptive strike of basically getting it out there instead of having to react after the article was released. That was all. It was going to either trickle out or be like a waterfall spreading around the country, and then they were going to go to her for a response. So it would have been reactive. She wanted to be proactive and basically say it's a BS article. And like you said, she said, I got a lawyer, and if any story in there is wrong, I'm suing, which is absolutely her right, just as it's this journalist's right to do an article and publish an article that he or she feels like they should publish. And it's not shocking that it would get published around the time when there's the most biggest spotlight on your subject, because remember, her side is to win basketball games. The journalist side is to write a great piece and, oh, by the way, get a lot of eyes on it, which when you release an article like this during this time of year is exactly what's going to happen.
And when Kim Mulkey decides to respond like this, you can be damn sure that now every eye will be trained on this. And it surely will be disappointing and probably a letdown relative to expectation, all because she decided to train our eyes right in that direction. Dad, Claudia, today does feel like a lot of waiting around for the other shoe to drop here and a couple of the biggest stories in the world of sports. We mentioned in the last segment Kim Mulkey and the impending Washington Post story that prompted a really strong response from her at the podium before their game in the round of 32 the other day. And on one hand with that, Dad, I think the interesting thing looking at this story, and I saw Holly Anderson over at Channel 6 make this point, I don't know what could be written here that was going to go a long way, short of major scandal, which if that's in there, then that's the obvious caveat to this, where if there is some major scandal that we've seen written about her, then that might change it. But in general, when you're talking about a piece that could be breaking down the tenure of Kim Mulkey around college basketball, she's always been a very polarizing figure, usually outside of the fan bases that employ her at that school. She's not been a coach that's been tremendously well liked by the rest of college basketball for any number of reasons, any number of things written about her and dealings with former players before. And so I don't know how much was going to change necessarily in here with the conversation around her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Outside of violations that we're talking about, which I don't think that's where this is going, I do. I think it's going to be about her as a coach behind the scenes at practice or how she treats players. I think that's, again, I don't know. I haven't read the article, but usually when you're trying to seek out so many former players, now it could certainly be on a number of topics, but one of it will absolutely be treatment. She's a hard coach. Listen, she's successful, no doubt about it. She is successful without question, but she is a hard coach. So, maybe that's what this is going to be about. But just like you said last segment, I mean, because of the way it's all been handled and Kim coming out and commenting on it before it comes out, will make even more eyeballs on it now maybe than there were going to be before, Claudia.
Certain words that she brought up, she called the reporter sleazy and she's calling it a hit piece. In my mind, if she's bringing lawyers into this, it has to be something pretty serious if she's using these particular words and already talking about bringing a lawsuit into it. That's where my mind went when I heard that.
See, I don't think so on that. I just think it's not what she likes. Remember, when we talk about these college coaches, they are control freaks. They are used to having everything their way. Powerful people in general operate like that. And so she didn't even say in that entire press conference, she never, because again, if you get a question list, you might have some idea of what's coming. She, like most other people, has not read the article because it hasn't been published yet. But you probably get some sort of idea. She never once said it said anything untrue about her or intimated anything untrue. She said she would sue if there was something untrue, but she said that article ignores all the positive results from the last 40 years for her in favor of just highlighting the negative ones. She didn't deny anything. She just said the focus was off, in her estimation, of an article that she didn't read, and she went on the usual offensive that we see a lot of people in her position take now, which is discredit. This is why nobody trusts the media anymore, and trying to immediately tear down the institutions like that. Like, these aren't original tactics. She's borrowing from a playbook that's been run a lot here from people in powerful positions that want their way heard. And it's not to say, again, that immediately you just go on the other side of Kim Mulkey because you don't like her, but the way this is painted is not like an original strategy on her part.
Yeah, it's not. But also, when we talk about stories that are going to garner a lot of attention, we also talk about how long you're a headline. And could we say maybe luckily for her, Mike, that Shohei Ohtani has a press conference today. So nobody's really going to care about that article or talk about that right now because the world is waiting to hear what Shohei has to say.
Yes, an incredible Monday news dump, Claudia, that'll likely end up benefiting Kim Mulkey and company there. The Washington Post would be wise to wait till after today to hit publish on that article because we have a lot more to look forward to.
Yes, that is true. We don't know exactly what he's going to say, and we don't know what time, but he does have a media conference today where he's set to speak to talk about this gambling and theft allegations against his former interpreter, who was fired, by the way, by the Dodgers on Wednesday. We've been talking about it in case you missed it. If you live under a rock, at least $4.5 million was either being sent or stolen from or sent by Ohtani's interpreter from Ohtani's bank account to an illegal book. And I think the key here is the fact that it was an illegal book. We've heard sort of two stories about it. Shohei was in on the money transfer, and then they stepped back on that, and his rep said, actually, no, the money was stolen from his bank account. So I'm assuming he's going to clear all of that up for us today. But either way, Senior, like you said, this is going to garner all the headlines, regardless of what he says. Is there anything you expect him to?
Well, I expected before this press conference for all of them to get together and get their story straight. I mean, let's be on the same road here where we're going. Okay, let's all work together. The one thing we all have to remember about this, Mike, is Shohei is not under investigation. He is not at all at this point anyway under investigation by the law or by the league. But he's just going to basically clear the air, which this is going to be a very, very, very interesting press conference.
And worth noting, by the way, Shohei Ohtani is the one that's in charge of this press conference. He is not being forced to do this by Major League Baseball or anything like that. He is going out here and addressing this ahead of it, wasn't asked to by the Dodgers or anything like that. So it'll be very curious, to your point, if they finally can seem like they've got their ducks in a row with this thing there. Major League Baseball has made it very clear that their cash cow will not be the one being investigated right now. But Dad, I would imagine Major League Baseball is going to do their best to get away from this expeditiously. And that's part of why I'm sure Shohei now is going to get out and say, hey, there's been a lot of noise around this. It's not my voice. And for Shohei, that's been par for the course. Most of what we know about Shohei has not been in his voice. It's been what we've projected on the quiet, incredibly talented baseball player in the middle now of all this controversy here. And we've got even more coming out about his interpreter. Apparently, Ipe Mizuhara claims to have graduated from the University of California, Riverside. And now they're coming out and saying we have no record of this person graduating or attending our university. So all of this now, Dad, clouding it around the person that's the center of this story. And then still the thing lurking in the background for all of us is, Dad, is any of this going to come back to him betting on baseball? Because that still, I'll go back to what we talked about last week, is the dividing line in the sand, where if a player bets on non-baseball sports with illegal bookmakers, that penalty falls under the commissioner's discretion. So Rob Manfred here in his swan song as the commissioner would get to decide what that looks like. And you'd have to imagine for the biggest star in baseball, it would probably amount to nothing more than a slap on the wrist. The thing that we're all paying very close attention to is after we had his interpreter tell us, oh no, I would never bet on baseball because I'm in the team meetings and we know better, as he bet on sports with an illegal bookmaker in a way that expressly in those team meetings is also deemed to be illegal, you can understand why there's a degree of skepticism around that from the rest of us, all looking to see if this threshold will be crossed that would take this from a story that could go away quickly to a story that could crack the bedrock of the sport.
Yeah, I think baseball is really trying to get that shield in between Shohei and the interpreter right now and basically say, while the interpreter is with Shohei all the time, was an employee of the Dodgers, he's not part of baseball. He's not a player on the field. He doesn't have anything to do with baseball. This is separate from our baseball. So if you want to make it a legal issue, fine. It's a legal issue outside of baseball. It doesn't include our guy. I think they want to build that force field around Shohei and baseball in this. But you're right, Mike. I mean, what more comes out? I don't imagine any more is coming out today from Shohei. But I think if people is there something to dig? Is there something more to find? Will there be something more to find? Maybe there won't be. I don't know. But you're right. It is something that you read and you kind of go, ooh, you know what? It doesn't smell the greatest, when you're looking at this whole situation and how quickly one story came out and then a story changed in that camp. So while I think Shohei is going to satisfy certainly the baseball side of it, I'm sure there are going to be those that are going to continue to look into this.
Yeah, I'd imagine if you're playing bingo for Shohei's press conference today, I never once, or my interpreter never once bet on Major League Baseball, is going to be said very early in this press conference as they continue to guard against the worst possible threat to his future here. And from there, it'll be curious what story they finally settle on here. And then I would imagine the brevity of this. This isn't going to be a 4-minute Kim Mulkey diatribe. This is, I'd imagine, going to be a very quick, concise statement through what has to be the most nervous interpreter in the entire world of sports walking into that press conference today to be the guy following the guy having delivered this message. Good luck, sir.
Back here on GoJo and Golic with the weekend roundup. Guys, I need your best of the best from the weekend. GoJo, you first. Your all-weekend team, please.
Yeah, whipping around the rest of the world of sports on a busy, busy March Madness weekend. There's probably still going to be some of that flavor mixed into this, but we'll go honorable mentions, second team, and first team picks for the best performers of the weekend. And Dad, the answer to the age-old question is where I start off for my all-weekend honorable mention. Is it wrong to be strong? The answer is no, especially if you are Louisiana high school heavyweight champion, heavyweight lifter, Dwayne Coleman, who this weekend, all over my timeline, set the Louisiana high school powerlifting state record, squatting 900 pounds at the LHSAA state championships on Saturday at the Cajun Dome in Lafayette. This man is a certified hoss, and Dad stroked 900 pounds in a way that makes my lower back quiver sitting here right now.
I can't even, I wouldn't even worry about it because I couldn't lift it off the rack, let alone start a descent. It would be a one-way trip. And listen, he didn't struggle much. He did not struggle much doing that. That was unbelievably impressive with what he did. So congrats to him. And he's got to be, if he's playing football, a guard or a center somewhere on the inside.
He's
really,
462 pounds himself, Dad. And in the rest of his lifts for the weekend, his 3-lift total was 2,005 pounds. He had a 500-pound bench and a 630-pound deadlift to go along with the 900-pound squat.
Unbelievable. Absolutely impressive. Congrats to him. My honorable mention is going to go to our alma mater, Mike, and Hannah Hidalgo. We've talked about Notre Dame women basketball team. They got won their first round game. Now they're going to get ready to take on Ole Miss today to get to the Sweet 16. But, she was the ACC Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, but first team All-American. Where there were two true freshmen, Juju Watkins from USC and Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame were the two freshmen on the starting five of the All-American team. Very impressive. But what she has done, what she has come into, and we talked in the Ivy last week about her, getting the international work that she got before the season, having the season she had. But now listen, the team side of it, you want to go and you want to win that national championship. They keep winning. They're eventually going to run into South Carolina. But what she's accomplished, Mike, on the individual side, teed off here now by first-team All-Americans, pretty impressive.
I was amazed by the maturity that she's developed in such a short time as a freshman here. In this game, Kent State, they were out in front for most of the game, but it wasn't a prolific shooting night or scoring night for Hannah by any means. And for most freshmen, they might take that a certain type of way and shell up. And all she did was batten down the hatches on the defensive end. 5 of her 6 steals came in the third quarter at the peak maybe of some of that offensive frustration. She completely helped change the tide of that game with her defensive effort alone. She is a force of nature out there on the court. She's a reason why, despite all the injury, you can still have a ton of confidence in her and Sonia Citron and Maddie Westbeld and the rest of this Notre Dame squad going forward. All right. That being said, time to get to the all-weekend second team pick here. And while we're doing women's college basketball, Dad, I want to give this one to Dawn Staley's dog, Champ, who made an appearance on the podium. As we've seen over the years, plenty of people head up to the podium, children, babies, what have you, all working their way up there. Happy to see dog representation up there and happy to see Champ know her worth. Dawn's dog sitting up there when the reporter said she's not taking questions today, said not until she gets nameplate. So, Dad, I would imagine that Champ Staley is going to have a nameplate very soon here in the near future, as no doubt South Carolina is going to keep doing their thing. They're a wagon. They are a terrifying force of nature to watch out there. They have absolutely blitzed through the first 2 rounds of this tournament, and it is going to take an act of God to beat this team.
Yeah, it is, and I hope we get one of those when Notre Dame meets up with them a little later in this tournament. We will wait and see. My second teamer goes to a British ultra-marathon runner. Her name is Jasmine Paris, Mike, and she is the first woman to compete the grueling Barkley Marathons race. This race started, I believe, in 1989, and only 20 people, I believe, have ever made the race. It's a 60-hour cutoff. 60 hours. 60 hours. The course is at Frozen Head State Park. It's 5 loops around there's a 20-mile loop that they have to go over 5 times. It covers 100 miles, and it includes, in all, 60,000 feet of ascent and descent. And that's higher than Mount Everest. So all total, they go higher than Mount Everest. You have to finish it in 60 hours. She made it by seconds, actually, and the first woman to ever do it. If you Google her and look up this picture, the amount of exhaustion she looks after this thing is ridiculous. She lost her voice, couldn't even speak afterward to do interviews. People are out of their minds. 100 miles with 60,000 feet of ascent and descent? Are you kidding me? This is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. I saw this popping up a while back on the timeline and been meaning to watch the documentary on it. But you're right, 35 runners every year and have to submit entry via application, and all those are very closely guarded. Like, it's a very interesting process to even get into this race, let alone survive it. And imagine, Dad, all of the miles you just described and the harrowing feeling inside of being seconds away from not reaching that goal after all the work that you put in. That had to be such a rush to finish that. So congratulations to her. That is absolutely insane for someone to pull off here. Speaking of insane things pulled off, Dad, let's get to the all-weekend first team, because I know you're going to want to talk about a lot of wrestling here. So I'll get out of the way and just give my all-weekend first team pick to Gio Reyna and the U.S. men's national team side there. They won their 3rd straight CONCACAF Nations League trophy against Mexico last night. You always know what time it is when you're looking up on Twitter and Dos Acero is trending for whatever, well, not for whatever reason, because the U.S. is once again beating Mexico in a chaotic CONCACAF event. So I don't know much. U.S. soccer always baffles me in the public conversation about it, Dad. It waxes and wanes from people always sounding the alarm and raising flags that we're not where we need to be and we're not end up catching up the way people thought we were. But then as soon as we get into CONCACAF and beat Mexico, it feels like it's time to party like it's 99 all over again. So I'll ride the good wave now and the good feelings. A couple of really impressive goals in this. Now you get to talk about wrestling.
Oh, yes, I do, because there was another championship over the weekend, the NCAA Wrestling Championships. And my first team goes to the entirety of Penn State wrestling program. Mike, we want to talk about dynasties. We talk about the Chiefs and such and any other dynasty. This is their 11th national championship in the last 13 years. I mean, they have absolutely dominated the sport. They're led by Cale Sanderson, a guy who went undefeated, won 4 titles in the NCAA. They set a record for points. They had 2 champions, Carter Starch and who else? It was Aaron Brooks. Both of these guys, Mike, both are 4-time NCAA champs. And that has only happened, this is now 7 times, twice this year. One time by Pat Smith, Cale Sanderson, their coach, has done it. Kyle Dake, Logan Stieber from Ohio State, and I'm going to try and pronounce it right, Yanni Diacomilis from Cornell. The interesting thing, 2 of these 7 players or wrestlers both came from Cornell, and now 2 have come from Penn State. So it's really impressive what Penn State is doing right now. Again, a record in points. They had 4 champions in this as well. 2 of them, as I mentioned, won all 4 years they wrestled in the NCAAs. An absolutely incredible program right now, and what a joy just to watch the enjoyment of the basketball tournament. I get that out of flipping back and forth and watching the wrestling as well. And right now, Penn State and Cale Sanderson is the team.
It was amazing texting my dad about things going on in college basketball this weekend for him to have missed most of them, because he was one of the people watching the NCAA wrestling tournament there. My father was a former collegiate wrestler, for anyone that wasn't aware of that before. And Dad, I can't believe you buried the lead. We got a spladle this weekend all over the timeline. Everyone was marveling at the weird hip movements of a couple of these guys.
It was weird, but people will look at that and they'll make some joke about wrestling, and I don't want that to happen, just like you guys were in our family text. So I wasn't giving anybody fodder to that. I'll just say congrats to Carter Starch and Aaron Brooks for 4 championships, and to Penn State for winning the title. I will give them no other ammo than that to go mock my sport.
Don't Google spladle on a work computer is all I'll tell you. We'll be back for hour number 2 next on GoJo Golic.
hour 2 of GoJo and Golic before we get to some NFL talk. First, we need a Starch Madness update. Similar to the men's and women's bracket, it's been pretty chalky across the board for the beverage winners, and we'll get to the main matchups as well. GoJo, take it away.
Yes, Starch Madness, our 32-team bracket to figure out the best fast food item in the world. Been off to a very, very chalky start here, Dad. Finishing off last week before we get to the voting now for our Treat 16. Sweet 16, I guess, would have worked too. We felt like we needed to differentiate some here, so
yeah,
I feel good about Treat 16. But we had the beverages on Friday here. Number 1 seed Baja Blast beat the Baskin-Robbins Freeze. Number 2 seed McDonald's Fountain Coke beat the Dunkin' Coolada. 3 seed Sonic Cherry Limeade beat the Panera Lemonade. And 4 seed Starbucks Iced Coffee beat Popeye's Cane Iced Tea. So we had a lot of chalk throughout the whole tournament so far. It's been really interesting to see the dominance, which means I think in most people's eyes we correctly seeded this tournament. Now is where the rubber meets the road, because we've got the Treat 16 round opening up for voting now. We've had our 4 different regions still, the mains, sides, desserts, and drinks. And we're back in the main menu items today. And this is a doozy. This is what we had circled as soon as this bracket came out. The number 2 seed, Popeye's Chicken Sandwich, versus the number 3 seed, Chick-fil-A Spicy Chicken Sandwich. A war to end them all in the world of chicken sammies, Dad. My vote is on the Popeye side. It is a bigger, juicier chicken sandwich. It is one that I greatly enjoyed. You get a lot of bang for your buck. I don't know where you're at on this. The Quarter Pounder versus the Crunchwrap Supreme is the 1-4 matchup there, and I will also be voting for the lower seeded item in the Crunchwrap Supreme. I think what would have been the 1 seed in my bracket.
So first, the chicken sandwiches. I think I agree with you. I've had Chick-fil-A spicy chicken as of late, but the Popeye's chicken sandwich, I do think you get a little more bang for your buck there. So I think I would lean there. The Quarter Pounder versus the Crunchwrap Supreme, it's like I know Taco Bell's been around for a while. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But for me, this is like nostalgia versus something I was like just last year, being when in South Bend, going to the Taco Bell, and it was your mother's idea one day. She said, I feel like Taco Bell. We went in there and I got a Crunchwrap Supreme and I was like, wow. So I've gotten many since then. So this is a tougher one for me. I'm not sure where I'm going yet. The Quarter Pounder, which I grew up on and still every now and then, I'll toss one down for old time's sake. But that Crunchwrap Supreme really hit me hard last year.
Listen, a double Quarter Pounder with Big Mac sauce is still a fast food delicacy on par with most anything out there. But this is the big leagues right now. And the Crunchwrap Supreme at Taco Bell, which I think is the premier when you think of fast food in this country, I understand McDonald's is still going to get the top building. But I think in the spirit of it all, at the heart of it, especially with some of the innovation we've seen, the recent keynote introducing the Baja Blast key lime pie that they're rolling out here, and all these other delights, I think they're innovating in a way that right now is leaving their competition behind in the field. But the Crunchwrap Supreme is the face that helped launch 1,000 ships. So I'm going to rock with that one here. The other one, again, I'm very interested to see this play out. So much of this has been regional variety taking hold. I think big Chick-fil-A has got a lot of dollars in people as far as their satisfying of a bunch. And they've got the great customer service there. I think that's the other part about Chick-fil-A is they leave a good taste in everyone's mouth because the food is genuinely good, but also it's a militant dedication to making sure the customer experience is a positive one for everyone, like except for certain groups of people based on that company's proclivities.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm with you. Sometimes if I get a great sandwich, but it was way too inconvenient to get, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as kind of the quick, steady stream they have at Chick-fil-A. So that could be we obviously not a category, but best as far as procession of getting your food, I think Chick-fil-A is right there.
Yeah, usually there's in my mind, when it comes to dining in general, for certain kinds of food, there's an inverse correlation between the quality of service and the cleanliness of the restaurant and the quality of the food. Like usually if you just go to a place that's like a one name title for the restaurant, usually that's like, all right, the dirtier the place is, the better I actually believe that food to be. Claudia, all of this is an interesting background. At GoJo and Golic, by the way, is where everybody can go vote on this on our Twitter account right now. Weigh in, help democracy reign. We appreciate everyone that's helped us get to to this point now, but we got to continue to march forward and crown a champion alongside what's going on in March Madness. I say it is funny to bring this up at a time where we're getting ready to talk about the NFL owners meeting, Claudia, and we got the picture that we wait for at the start of every year with the NFL head coaches all lined up together. And I got to be honest, I don't know how many of these guys have been eating at any of these fast food restaurants lately.
Well, I was shocked. I thought it was a really nice picture, and then all of a sudden we get emails from GoJo freaking out about it. So you're going to have to break this down for us because I think they all look great. What makes you so mad about this, GoJo?
No. I agree. They look phenomenal. The NFL owners meetings are kicking off. And if you're not aware, it's the rite of passage every year. I know Big Cat and PFT usually spend a ton of time breaking this down. You had the great viral video of Travis Kelce on New Heights last year, not knowing who half the coaches in the AFC West in his own division were, looking at this coaches class picture. But no, Claudia, my whole thing with this picture is as you look around with so many of the new young coaching faces of the league, these guys are in phenomenal shape. Like, I think Dad, listen, you between being a player, being someone whose brother played in the NFL before you got there and now has covered the league for 3 decades, is this not the most in-shape collection of NFL head coaches that we've ever seen?
Yes, without a doubt. I'm going through here and you look for the guys that you worry about and you don't see them. You know, you see a bunch. Now, also, I'm sure there's going to be people that look at this picture and don't even recognize some of these guys because of some of the new young coaches
Travis Kelce
that have come in. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But of course, the greatest of all time is Andy Reid still. Every year, Andy Reid gets himself in that Hawaiian shirt, gets to sit right in the middle, and then the Harbaugh brothers are next to him on his right-hand side. But, man, yeah, you do go through some of these. A lot of things come to mind. Is youth, who these guys are, Andy Reid's Hawaiian shirt, and what would a Royal Rumble look like? That's always the big thing for me.
And the Royal Rumble's gotten a lot more interesting based on a lot of these recent submissions. I mean, Raheem Morris is absolutely shredded in this picture. Jonathan Gannon is built like a chimpanzee. The dude's an absolute unit when you look at that guy. I know everyone laughed at him from the pew, pew, pew thing, but when you look at the way his arms are built right now, that dude is terrifying looking. Tickets to the gun show are on sale in the Valley of the Sun right now. That dude looks incredible.
Yeah, it would be what would maybe only have been a 3 or 4 person favorite in a Royal Rumble. Now you got a mixture of youth. You got a mixture of guys who are a little older. Dan Quinn still looks like he's in pretty damn good shape as well. But you wonder if conditioning would be a factor the longer the Royal Rumble goes on. And then it would be interesting of who pairs off in that, who becomes teammates to throw another guy out of the ring. That was always interesting to me as well. But you have a number of guys. I would love to see DK odds on this. I know I'm just making stuff up right now. But who would win the head coach's Royal Rumble? I got to believe a lot of people are still going to put their money on Dan Campbell just because he looks so good. I mean, geez, it's ridiculous. But you got other linebackers in there now.
Physically one of the biggest of all of them in addition to being in very good shape still.
See, that's the thing. I believe others would team up or dump him out of the ring. I think they would say, who's the strongest here? While we have numbers, let's get the strongest out of here.
Interesting. All I know is poor Dave Canales, the newest member of the NFC South's head coaching fraternity, getting absolutely man-spread all over by Andy Reid, just boxing him out in the middle of that picture. Canales cramped in there with all of his muscles and hair gel by Andy Reid exuding big alpha energy, back-to-back Super Bowl champion head coach, living his best life in the middle of that photo. So, Claudia, while I could sit here and talk all day about the beauty of this picture, there has been some interesting quotes coming out. And there's been coaches already talking this morning at the podium there, but we've had some pretty interesting sound bites already coming out of these meetings around the NFL.
Yeah, and I think maybe one of the biggest ones comes out of the Jets organization. Robert Saleh said he's excited to welcome quietness to the team. Which so far, I feel like if we've talked anything Jets, it's been anything but quiet, especially with Aaron Rodgers. He said last year was a little loud. We welcome a little bit of quietness. Senior, how convinced are you that any bit of this is true?
Well, I think it could be true if all we're doing is talking about football, right? I mean, but 4 plays into their first game, we weren't talking about football anymore. We were talking about what Aaron Rodgers was talking about when he went on Pat McAfee's show. We were talking about the coach's decision to not go out and get a veteran quarterback to help this team out, and then how players maybe were grumbling through the year. It was anything but what was going on the field was the last thing you talked about. So it all depends, again, on if drama starts. I mean, they've done good things right now. When you bring in a Tyron Smith, a Morgan Moses, was a John Simpson, you brought in 3 linemen. Now, with Tyron Smith, you're going to have to cross your fingers, hold your breath a little bit. He stays healthy, but let's just say they're all healthy. I mean, that's a huge improvement to that line that is blocking for Aaron Rodgers. So the more the talk is actually on football, and then it would just be about wins and losses. Are they living up to? They sold the farm to try and make a move here. Is it working or not? Other than that, the drama was off the field for a reason. If Aaron Rodgers is on the field, I think that takes care of a lot of it.
I just feel like I learned my lesson from Stu Gatz last year, where, yes, there are a bunch of football reasons to be excited about the Jets right now. You're not going to catch me in that trap. Not for a second. I got excited last year. I was ready to tell Stu Gatz he had a quarterback last year and that everything was going to go well. We had some concerns about this team football-wise, and we know injuries hard to predict, but this is the Jets. They are a force stronger than nature, and so I am not going to let myself fall into this trap right now. They have, Dad, to your point, they have addressed the principal needs that this team had going into the offseason, but I am not going to be out here in front of this one. You're going to have me be the last one on the Jets wagon before this thing pulls away.
Oh, I completely agree. Without question, I agree. My point is, I didn't say we would be talking good football. I just said we would be talking football with the Jets instead of off the field stuff with the Jets. I agree with you. There's no way I'm projecting anything for this team. Though I will say that projections before the season is still going to have them ahead of the Patriots because the Patriots are sorry, Claudia, going to be basically in full rebuild here.
100%. I'm about to pull up the odds now, but it's not even going to be close, unfortunately. And I don't know if this is good news or not, but the Patriots we are going to bring up next because them and the Commanders both are talking about the fact that they are taking trade calls, which isn't too surprising. We've been hearing about this with Mayo. His quote was, obviously, quarterback is definitely a priority. With that being said, we're still open to any type of deals that come our way. So they are saying that they will trade back. They've mentioned if they don't get Daniels that they're much more open to that. Washington's head coach Dan Quinn also said the Commanders' phone is ringing in trade talks and that they will listen, but it sounds unlikely that anybody would offer them enough to move down. I feel like maybe that this holds a little bit more true for the Patriots, but as we know, it is lying season, GoJo. Do you think both of these things are lie, or how much truth do you see in it?
Yeah, I love how much fear we have to walk around with every time we hear a quote during this lead up to the NFL draft. But Dad, to Claudia's point, I don't think there's any way Washington's walking out of the top 2 in a draft this top heavy without one of the quarterbacks involved here. I still think it's going to end up being Drake May after all of the different changes that we've seen on draft boards across the industry. But I do think New England moving back is becoming more and more something that I'm getting acquainted with as an idea, because I'll keep going back to while Jaden Daniels got talked about as a potential 3rd overall pick, I have not viewed him that way so far. Plenty of people that I trust and usually value the opinion of do, and so I've got to entertain that as a possibility. But Dad, this Patriots roster needs so much help. The fact that in the article talking about this, they indicated, I think it was Elliot Wolf, their personnel guy, indicated that their sincerity and seriousness about improving the quality of this roster was how hard they went after but did not get Calvin Ridley, who ultimately signed with the Tennessee Titans, is a reminder they haven't done much to shore up the roster around whoever the quarterback's going to be. And we've talked about it. More quarterbacks are broken than made by the rosters they have set around them from these bad teams that are picking at the top of the draft. And this is as bad a Patriots roster as we can remember offensively in a while.
And Senior, just quickly,
so for any team,
to tell you the odds, you're correct, because the Jets are at plus 235 in the East, the Patriots 2,500. So there's quite the gap between the two. Yeah.
Dear God.
Rod Mayo's got his work cut out for him. First year head coach with New England. So Mike, this is kind of the argument then, right? Is the bottom line is for a New England team or anybody that needs a quarterback that's up early and can get one of the supposed top quarterbacks is you need a lot of help. So let's stick with New England. They have a lot of holes to fill. They need a lot of help. But if you have a grade on one of these quarterbacks, and you're going to get the third try here unless you wanted to trade up, and it's a franchise grade, then you have to take the quarterback, right? Because you can fill all the holes you want, but as we've seen, if you don't have a really good to great quarterback, it doesn't matter. So unless you see on the horizon through knowing the end of other quarterbacks' contracts or quarterbacks coming up in the draft where you think it may work out down the road, if you in your meetings say, if this guy is on the board when he gets to us, we have to take him because we have a franchise grade on him. Other than that, I guess the first thing I should have said is, I don't care what your thought is, you always answer the phone. You always answer the phone if it rings. There's nothing no guarantees of anything, so you always answer the phone. But, man, you got a lot of holes to fill. You have a franchise grade on a quarterback that's available when you pick. In today's world, I think you got to take the quarterback.
Well, I mean, but that's not even today's world, Dad. That's been traditional thinking as always. Yeah. And you're right, but I think you'd need to think, if you were going to do that, you would probably need to seriously consider starting Jacoby Brissett for this year, because look what happened to Bryce Young last year. Look what's happened to a litany of quarterbacks who have come into the draft and been undone early in their careers because the rosters around them were no way ready to compete in the way that could help foster the kind of growth you need to see from these young players. It's not everyone who can come in. And even Joe Burrow, who's used as the most recent example of a quarterback who came in and actually was able to lift a franchise out of obscurity or relative obscurity. The Bengals had certainly making the playoff success under Andy Dalton and the prior administration there, but they had not been a team competitive on the championship level the way we expect them to be now. Even he had a pair of incredible first-round wide receivers, even if not an offensive line to stand behind. Even he had a defense led by Lou Anarumo that turned into one of the better ones in the NFL through that stretch run that he could rely on in a way that other guys don't. And so even he didn't do it all the way by himself, even if he did it more by himself than most. But as you've talked about with the C.J. Strouds of the world, that situation to me is much more of a gross outlier than almost anything else we'll see. C.J. Stroud had help. He had stuff come together around him at the right time, the way we anticipate for the Bears too. I just don't see that for New England. And so this becomes something that, if you're going to then pick the quarterback, you got to have a really firm plan with how you're going to do this in a way that doesn't screw him up completely the way you just screwed up the last quarterback that you tried to pick near the top of the draft.
Mike, I agree with you, but you know exactly what owners and higher ups see. Look what the Texans did. You can have somebody scream in their face, like I've said, and listen, I'm not the only one.
But I'm saying C.J. Stroud's not the outlier. It's the organization that's the outlier.
I know. I understand that. But what Robert Kraft will see is it happen to say, so it can happen if we play this guy. Did we think anything of that with Houston? We never thought they'd do what they did. And then they did it, not just from the quarterback position, but other guys stepped up as well. And I agree with you that, if you want to save them for a little bit, if you haven't built a team around you, but I've never had a problem with putting in a guy right away. Like I said, you're at that level. If you can't handle it mentally, then, well, okay, that may be on you, but they are tough situations. I do understand that when you're getting beat up all the time.
Yeah, to me, it's less mental and more just, reinforcing bad habits. I mean, Bryce Young and what Dave Canales is going to have to do is go in and basically rewire a quarterback because after last year, he internalized so many bad habits because of the way he wasn't protected and the weapons he didn't have to throw to. And what about us thinks that would be different in New England? The situation offensively looks nearly as dire with maybe a couple of exceptions on that team. And so you'd be throwing a quarterback immediately into that in a way that I just don't know if it would be productive for them at this point. And so again, just the way I view the board right now, trading back would seem like it would be the more likely option for New England if you want to amass this going forward. And I think admit that you've got a little bit different timeline as an organization because, you're coming off a falter after one of the all-time great runs that we've ever seen in the world of sports. You tried to hit the dismount with Bill Belichick and a new quarterback coming off the Tom Brady era, and that didn't work. And so now that sort of doubles all of the things that you've got to go in there and clean up from an organizational standpoint as you try and right the ship in New England to try and get those odds a little bit closer than the ones Claudia just read. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We'll keep an eye on the NFL owners' meetings and see what other quotes can come out of there. Breaking news for everybody. Jim Harbaugh has said once again that J.J. McCarthy should be the number one quarterback taken in this year's draft. And while we're all going to laugh, I will give him some credit, Dad. That is exactly what I'd want my college's head coach, or now former college head coach, saying about one of our draft prospects there. I understand Jim Harbaugh doesn't have to worry about recruiting at Michigan anymore, but I'm sure he loves Sharon Moore, who now is the head coach there and was his OC, and stuff like that, knowing the program is going to have the backs of its draft eligible players. That's something that players notice, because your future and what you're going to school for a lot of guys is wanting to make it to the NFL, and seeing that kind of stuff out there is still, I think, good business for Jim Harbaugh, no matter if we disagree with it.
Yeah, I agree with you, even though we disagree with that comment. But I agree with you. It's always good when your coach, your organization has your back. So good for Jim for doing that. J.J. McCarthy is going to be one of the bigger enigmas of 3 years down the road, right? Of what we see, because he's a guy who everybody is basically saying, well, he hasn't done it all the time like these other quarterbacks have, but he's done it on a smaller sample size. And basically Jim Harbaugh and Michigan is saying, well, just wait. When he has to do it more, he'll be able to do it more. And I guess that's what we all have to wait and see.
He's going to be a great enigma for a little less than a month down the road, as we are inside a month now heading towards the NFL draft, or about right at a month coming up to the NFL draft at the end of April there. So can't wait for that one. But if we're going to talk about coaches talking about their quarterbacks, man, oh man, if you thought the discourse around Caleb Williams was noisy going into this draft, next year with Shadur Sanders is going to be very, very interesting right now, because Deion Sanders over the weekend, I thought, had some interesting comments. He went on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast and was asked about his son Shadur, and also Travis Hunter, their star two-way player on Colorado's team that's expected to be a really coveted NFL prospect. And he was very, very frank about the way that he assessed not only their status going into the NFL, but the way that they're going to approach this process.
Where do you predict Shadur and Travis going in the draft?
Top 4.
That's pretty beautiful.
Anywhere from 1 through 4. One of them is going to be 1. Now, all this is subjective, because I know where I want them to go.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
So he went on to say, I know where I want them to go, but there's certain cities where it ain't going to happen. It could be an Eli Manning situation, and we're not doing that. And Dad, in a day and age where we've talked about player empowerment, guys trying to influence their future, obviously, because of that reference, it's not a new novel concept. Eli Manning was a part of something that is oft referenced by a lot of people who are talking about this now, but we just went through part of a draft cycle where people were bringing up comments from Caleb Williams' camp about wanting potential ownership stake, or would he return back to school? And so now to hear this, Dad, how does this hit you coming from Deion Sanders, not even from Shadur's mouth, but from his father's mouth and his head coach's mouth about his NFL future?
Listen, I never have a problem with people wanting to swing their leverage hammer. I've said that my entire career in the media. And I understand people are going to look at this, and there are those that already dislike Deion Sanders, and this is going to fuel their fire, saying, look, he's just trying to control everything and blah, 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 blah. Yes, and all I know is it didn't work out in the first year of Colorado how I wanted. He really made us talk a lot of college football in Colorado. Deion is an incredible, dynamic person. And what he's trying to do, listen, I go back. Mike Greenberg and I were sitting there in the draft when this happened with Eli. And remember, it was Eli's dad. It was Archie who said he's not going to play with the Chargers. He's not playing out there, and it worked out the trade. And, I mean, listen, two guys that we talk about as Hall of Famers. Phillip Rivers ended up with the Chargers, and Eli Manning ended up with the Giants. So he called that, manipulated that. And people go back and even forget further, John Elway. John Elway had an option of playing Major League Baseball, and he basically told the Colts that. He said, you pick me, I'm going to play baseball. He had some leverage, and he used it. Welcome to Denver. Welcome to the career that you had. So if you feel you want to manipulate it, and the big thing with Deion is weather. He doesn't want his kids playing in cold weather. having to play at least half your schedule in a cold weather city. Now, it's not cold for all 8 of those games, as we know. And when you get to playoffs and other things, when you travel, you're going to play in the cold. That's going to happen. So, but while people may scoff at that, man, I'm fine. If that's a thought process that they discussed between the two of them, we'd like to go to a warmer city or we'd like to try and go here, shoot your shot. I mean, shoot your shot. You only get one chance at doing that, trying to get to the team you want, as John Elway did and as Eli Manning did. A lot of people aren't going to like it, but my thought is, Mike, you go around this thing one time, you got a guy in Deion who was one of the greatest to ever play the game, knows kind of the system, knows some way more things than we know, has more connections than we have. If he wants to, see where the interest is and see where the interest lies and maybe know in his hip pocket there's this warm weather team that's going to want him, so be it. I mean, man, do your thing. You got one shot to do it, do it. Because, as I said, there's going to be a ton of people say, oh, you just get drafted and go where you're supposed to go. Man, those are all people like me that had never had leverage in our lives to do anything to try and get where you wanted to go. And for some people, they wouldn't care. They just say, you know what? I just want to go. Draft me wherever and I'll go play. This is a situation where they're just saying, you know what? We're going to try and decide where we can go.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because there's part of me that initial reaction was, man, you're putting a hell of a bullseye on dude's back going into the season, but that's kind of something they've courted. Certainly Deion Sanders, we mentioned, has never been a stranger to that. It's a defensive back mentality, and for arguably the greatest DB to ever play professional football, not surprising that he would court the smoke, and his son seems to also carry himself with that confidence. He was an incredible player for lots of last year when he wasn't getting assaulted behind that offensive line that just couldn't protect him. I think I'm more interested in that because you're right, Dad, it's not surprising, new or novel what's going on here. I'm just going to be curious how it does work out for Shadur Sanders, the football player, because we've talked about sort of tangentially, next year's draft class doesn't have nearly as much juice at the quarterback position as this one does. There are a lot more unanswered questions at that spot with some of the players that are going to be coming up in college football next year, guys that have been good, not great players yet, who are going to try and make that name the way we see happen a lot in their final years. Shadur, I think right now probably has amongst the most name value of any of those players, but we saw the football part bottom out for Colorado after the first quarter of the season last year, and it still remains to be seen if they're going to be able to get that on track enough for Shadur to go out there and continue to show things in what could be a tightly contested race for the first quarterback off the board.
So I think last year before the season, it was 2 quarterbacks we talked about, right? It was Williams and May. Caleb Williams, Drake May. Caleb Williams, Drake May. This year, I think it's going to be Shadur Sanders and Quinn Ewers, the quarterback at Texas, right? Those are going to be the 2 that are going to be, I think, talked about the most going in. And listen, I get it. I mean, Shadur just got the snot kicked out of him, but the dude has got some talent. I mean, I am really anxious to see him at the next level of what he's going to do. He is so very, very talented. But you're right. It could be another tough year for him. You got to imagine. I mean, you could have never have coached or been to a game in your life, watched one and said, oh, they need help on the offensive line. Let's see if that happened, or let's see if there's some protection a little more for him. But I'm excited to see him play. But I do think it's those 2 quarterbacks. Listen, you cover college more than I do, so none of the other quarterbacks are coming to mind right now. But just like it was 2 last year, I think it's at least just those 2 this year right now.
Yeah, I think Jackson Dart at Ole Miss is going to draw some interest this year, knowing the kind of numbers that offense can put up with Lane Kiffin's squad there. But you're right, it's a much less name-branded quarterback class this year. And so Shadur is going to walk in with this. You're right, very compelling game. I thought was a very composed player amidst what a tire fire that offense ended up being at certain points towards the end of last year. But now going into this final, it's going to be interesting. And by the way, that he lumps Travis Hunter into this. Like, I think that's a story for another day. A player that pound for pound is better at his position even than Shadur Sanders right now in what we've seen from the two-way star who spent some of last year on the shelf injured. But man, when he's out there, no matter what you ask him to do, he seems to be able to make better plays than most everyone else doing it. And as a defensive back right now, like, man, being coached by Deion Sanders, which I'd imagine was a huge selling point when he followed him out to Colorado, seems to be paying off. And what he ends up becoming as a draft prospect for next year, where quite honestly, him, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame are going to be the guys that we talk about as probably that top DB off the board. Both of these guys getting that TLC from Deion Sanders at the podium in a big way. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. You can also catch the best of GoJo and Golic weekdays, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio, alongside their great lineup there. But if you missed any of the show and couldn't catch it live, you can catch all of our conversation about March Madness, the NFL's head coaching picture that popped off at the owners' meetings, and plenty more wherever you get your podcast, or available right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Speaking of YouTube and things that did very well last week, I don't know if I've got more notes on anything that we'll start with than this. Bathtub Zatty was a conversation that we had last week about my father, an explanation of Onlyfans that all went pretty haywire here. Our Crack Social team has created a bit of a recap if you were someone that wasn't around for this before we show you the horrifying results that our staff has cooked up here. Take a listen.
Because I'll damn well do it if it's going to make the money that this young lady and these other influencers making it. You know what? I'm hopping on the friggin' train is what I'm going to do. I
get it.
Will be nude in the bathtub. Yes, I will. If I were to be Bathtub Daddy.
No. Why?
If I were to be Bathtub Daddy.
So my father, now our show team here, has mocked up, this is not the real OnlyFans account for Bathtub Zaddy. This is at least not yet real, as we've only just recently introduced the concept of OnlyFans to Dad. But Dad, what do you think about this?
Well, I was first going to say in the first thing they showed where I was sitting in the tub, that was not my body. Why not give me The Rock or John Cena's body? I mean, why are you giving me that dumpy body? That's not my body. I mean, give me something a little better than that.
Would The Rock or John Cena's body be your body, Dad? Would those be your body?
No, but it would look a lot. It'll bring in more money on OnlyFans than that body you guys showed. And the second pictures there that we just saw. Thank God for a lot of bubble bath.
The only way to fix this is what, Senior? To take an actual picture in the bathtub.
I actually,
no, please, God, don't
over the weekend.
That.
Over the weekend, I was in the bathtub. After your mother took a bath, I was in the bathtub. So as I was going to get out, she came back into the bathroom, and I said, "Hey, should we practice?" I said, "Why don't you get a towel and I'll walk, sexually into the towel." I can't even do it. I'm sorry.
I mean, even thinking about what my dad in his head would think walking sexy looks like would be more hilarious. This page would be more comedy than intimacy by far.
Whoa.
Hey, $100 a month too. That's what you'd be charging people, it looks like, from the picture, Senior.
Wow. And you listen,
that's respect.
I take a lot of baths, so let's just say I take a lot of baths. There'll be a lot of content.
I tell you what, I'm not ever here to yuck anyone's yum, but if you thought paying $100 a month to watch my father take baths was something you were interested in, there is no God you could find that could wash the sin that lives in your heart off clean enough to allow you to see heaven. I'll just say that. So let's mercifully get away from this and move on to that, Claudia, which is something way more up my alley than picturing my father in a bathtub marching sexually towards a towel.
I was just going to say, this is something you'll want to talk about. Dragon Ball theme park, the world's first theme park dedicated to Dragon Ball universe, comics, movies, and games. It's being built in Saudi Arabia. No opening date yet, but construction expected to start soon. GoJo! You can forget everything we just talked about and focus on this now.
Man, I tell you what. Now, this speaks to a point that we made a while back about the artist rendering of the Las Vegas A's potential stadium in Vegas, where if you can't nail the trailer when it comes to a movie or a stadium reno or anything else, you're doing it wrong. Buddy, they nailed this trailer because obviously there's nothing built yet at this point. This is all 3D artist renderings. But man alive, I've never really entertained a desire to go to Saudi Arabia, and I still have some trepidations about it now, but I'll be damned if the thing that wouldn't push me over the line potentially, Dad, and you've watched me watch this show since I was a middle schooler. Yeah. I used to come home, Toonami on Cartoon Network, my introduction to anime, the late Akira Toriyama's gift to the world, now looks like it might get the whole city treatment. You guys might never get me back from this.
Mike, I'm not going to lie. Listen, we have seen themed parks before, and they can be incredibly successful. And the money, obviously, they have out there to build on this. I don't know about Dragon Ball Z, so I don't know the intricacies of the 3D drawings. It looks incredible. And just because I like to see my kids happy, I would hope you would get to that someday, because it looks like Dragon Ball Z heaven for the likes of you and those others that know everything there is to know about Dragon. Do you think you know more about Dragon Ball Z or more about Harry Potter when that was popular and you were reading the books?
Man. That's a great question, Dad. I would probably give the slight edge to Dragon Ball Z just because there's still been recent content. So I've been updating a lot of the software on that, whereas Harry Potter's been untouched really since a lot of the Fantastic Beasts movies. I don't even think I've finished all of those.
Claudia, are you a Dragon Ball Z or were you a Harry Potter person?
No. Actually, for some reason, I love Harry Potter. I've never actually watched the movies. I've seen little parts of it, but I just love the little Harry Potter community. They're fun. And I've tried. I told GoJo, I've tried once upon a time. I dated a guy who loved anime, and I made the attempt, and I couldn't do it. So, but the theme park looks cool. I'll give it that. I just can't really watch TV. I'm boring. I don't really watch movies either. I just watch sports. So.
I agree. The theme park looks awesome, and it's very kind of my dad to offer to use his OnlyFans money to fund the entire trip for me, Dad. You didn't need to do that, but the fact that you offered and want to says a lot about your character, says a lot about the job that you've done as a father. I humbly accept that offer, by the way. The trip will probably be like a month and a half. I'm expecting a minimum 5-star hotel. I think they might be one of the places that has a 6-star hotel over there, so you should probably get to look into that.
No, absolutely not. No. You're a grown-ass man. Do your own thing.
We'll talk off air. I know this is kind of a tough spot for you right now. I'll file this through your superior and mom, and we'll get that going there. Yeah, we'll just send you the invoice later on when it all comes to that. Claudia, speaking of things we're looking forward to watching, or maybe not, let's get to the third here with an interesting announcement.
I was going to say, that's hard-earned money, too, by senior GoJo, so you can't just go on taking it.
Yes.
Happy Gilmore 2 is apparently coming out. Chris McDonald, who played Shooter McGavin in the original film, was on a Cleveland sports talk radio, and he let it out. He said there's a sequel. In a recent meeting they had with Adam Sandler, they've been talking about it. So, of course, everybody's talking about this on Twitter, on who the cast should be. Somebody said that Will Zalatoris, who is a professional golfer, who they say looks just like the caddy in the movie. He should be the actual caddy in Happy Gilmore 2, which would be awesome. It is fun to sort of think of what this cast would look like. But either way, I know I definitely want to go see this one.
Dad, I will say in this, I think to that point about Willie Z, because everyone's made that joke about him looking like Gilmore's caddy. You even see Adam Sandler tweeted him congratulations one time after a tournament win for him. I bet if you played your cards right with this, you could get the PGA Tour crawling all over themselves to get guys involved in this right now. They've been trying to do it with Full Swing and Netflix, but the natural boost of interest for a generation of golfers that grew up with this movie as canon, I'm sure would be pretty robust.
1,000% agree with that one. Two kind of sad parts of this, two characters that we knew from Happy Gilmore would not be in it. Carl Weathers played Chubbs, and Bob Barker, who played himself in the Pro-Am, will not be there. And what I'll say is I'm going to cast right now, and taking the place of Chubbs and being the new coach for Happy Gilmore, I think he's got a great sense of humor. It'd be funny, be good. Tiger Woods. He's not golfing now. He's got time. So go ahead and be Happy Gilmore's coach in this. So I think that'd be hilarious.
There we go. Get Tiger Woods out there coaching him. It's all in the hips. And Drew Carey, if you're not a coward, you'll go and fight Adam Sandler and defend Bob Barker's honor for the Price is Right's behalf. Defend our honor by downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing this show. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.